My son-in-law smiled sinisterly. Eat, old fool. This is a special dish. But I immediately realized something was wrong. D. This smiling son-in-law was hiding poison behind the facade of a family dinner. I pretended to swallow, but when he turned away, I switched the plates. You won't believe what happened an hour later. Their betrayal won't go unpunished. D. The consequences will hit them full force. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. They say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but an old dog with 42 years of pharmaceutical experience can smell poison from across a dinner table. It was a Sunday afternoon in mid-June when everything changed. I was sitting in my own dining room in Laurelhurst, watching my son-in-law Stanley Weber set a plate in front of me with the kind of smile that would make a shark nervous. Eat up, old fool. He said, "This is a special dish. I cooked it myself just for you." Stanley never cooked. In 6 years married to my daughter Veronica, he'd barely entered the kitchen. He was a car salesman at a dealership on 82nd Avenue, the kind of guy who thought microwaving leftovers qualified as cooking. But there he was presenting braised beef in wine reduction. The presentation was actually decent. That alone should have been my first warning. I lifted my fork, brought a piece close to my nose. The meat smelled fine, rich, and savory. But underneath was something else, a faint, bitter almond scent. Most people wouldn't notice. Most people hadn't spent 4 decades identifying medications by smell alone. "Smells interesting," I said. "What's in the sauce?" "Trade secret," Stanley said, dropping into his chair. He was already eating his portion, shoveling food like he hadn't eaten in days. Veronica, my 38-year-old daughter, sat between us picking at her salad. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She'd been doing that lately, avoiding eye contact, leaving rooms when I entered. I cut into the meat, brought it toward my mouth. The bitter smell intensified. Benzodiazepines. I'd bet my pharmacy license on it. Heavy dose. Probably crushed diazepam mixed into the sauce. In a younger person, severe sedation. In a 68-year-old man, it could stop my heart. "This is really something, Stanley," I said, setting down my fork. "You must have put a lot of thought into this. More than you know, old man." The way he said it made my skin crawl. There was anticipation in it, eagerness. Stanley turned to grab the wine bottle, his attention diverted. In that moment, I made my move. 42 years of precise hand-eye coordination. My plate slid left. His plate slid right, 3 seconds. When he turned back, I was cutting into what had been his portion, the clean meat. He didn't notice. Why would he? In his mind, I was just a foolish old man eating my last meal. "You know, Stanley," I said, chewing slowly, "I've been thinking about updating my will. Maybe I should discuss it with you and Veronica." His eyes lit up like a slot machine hitting jackpot. "That's great, Francis. Really great. We should definitely talk about that." I nodded, watching him eat. He was already halfway through the poison portion. Diazepam would take 30 to 40 minutes to hit full effect. "How's work been?" "Fine, fine. Sold 3 cars last week." A lie. I'd overheard his manager threatening to fire him 2 days ago. We made small talk. Veronica's yoga classes, the roses needing pruning, almost like a normal family dinner if you ignored the attempted murder. At minute 33, Stanley set down his fork, feeling a bit off. "Too much wine," I suggested, maybe. He rubbed his temples, head swimming. Minute 37. His words slurred. "Veronica? I don't feel, Stanley." Her voice rose. "What's wrong?" He tried to stand, managed 1 foot before his knees buckled. He caught the table edge, breathing hard. "Should I call someone?" Veronica asked. I pulled out my phone deliberately. Perhaps 911 would be appropriate. Stanley slumped back, his head lolling. His breathing was deep and regular. The sedated sleep benzodiazepines induce. Not dangerous for someone his age and weight. Uncomfortable? Embarrassing when paramedics arrived, but not lethal. Veronica was crying, shaking Stanley's shoulder. "Wake up, Stanley. Wake up." I made the call. Gave the address, explained my son-in-law appeared to have a reaction to dinner. The operator asked if he was breathing. I confirmed. Paramedics were on their way. The paramedics arrived within 12 minutes. They checked vitals, asked questions, loaded him onto a stretcher. Veronica insisted on riding along. "Francis, can you clean up?" she asked at the door, mascara running. "I'll call from the hospital." "Of course, dear, take your time." The door closed. The house fell silent. I stood in my dining room looking at 2 plates. The dinner I'd switched. The poison I'd escaped. For 42 years, I'd been a pharmacist. I'd helped people, measured medications to heal them, ease their pain, save their lives. But I'd also learned every drug's dark side. Every medication that could heal could also harm. It was all about dosage intent knowledge. Stanley Weber had just taught me something important. In my own house at my own table, I was in danger, and for the first time in 68 years, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't afraid, I was calculating. The paramedics left at 8:47 p.m. I checked my watch, starting a mental timeline. I cleaned the kitchen methodically, but didn't throw anything away. The plates went into separate paper bags, labeled and dated, the wine bottle, the leftover beef, all potential evidence. By midnight, Veronica still hadn't called. I sat in my study and started remembering. 3 months ago, March, my favorite wine, a 2018 Willamette Valley. Pinot Noir had tasted off bitter metallic. I'd poured it down the sink, assumed a bad cork, but Stanley had offered to organize my wine collection that week. He'd spent an hour in the cellar supposedly alphabetizing bottles. I went to the wine cellar, pulled out bottles from the back row. 3 had corks that sat slightly higher, as if removed and replaced. I opened one, sniffed the same metallic undertone. I poured it out and made a note. Wine tampering. March 2025. Multiple bottles. April. Stanley had cornered me in the kitchen. "Francis, you've been on the same medications for years. My buddy from college is a pharmacist now. He could review your prescriptions, get you on something more modern." I'd been taking the same blood pressure medication for 5 years. It worked. But Stanley insisted. I'd finally agreed. He took my pill bottles, returned them 3 days later with new labels. I never took them. Something felt wrong. The bottles had sat in my medicine cabinet, forgotten. I retrieved them now. The labels looked professional, but the pills didn't match. My medication was supposed to be small. White tablets. These were larger, different coating. I broke one open, tasted a minuscule amount, not blood pressure medication, something that made my heart rate spike. I spit it out. Rinse thoroughly. Made another note. Medication tampering. April 2025. Unknown substitution. May. Stanley asking about my will over breakfast. "So Francis, you've got everything arranged right. If anything happened to you, Veronica would be taken care of?" I thought he was being considerate. Now I heard the real question. What's in it for us? My phone buzzed at 1:47 a.m. Veronica. "Dad, Stanley's going to be okay. The doctors say he had some kind of reaction. They're keeping him overnight. What kind of reaction, they're not sure. Something about elevated levels. They asked what he ate. Tell them the truth. He made dinner." That's what I said. "They think maybe the meat was bad." Bad meat doesn't cause benzodiazepine toxicity. "When will you be home?" "Probably morning." "Can you lock up?" "Already done." "Get some rest." She hung up. I sat in the dark, pieces falling into place. This wasn't impulse. This was planning. The wine was testing. The medication switch, a slower method, tonight was the direct attempt. And Veronica, the way she couldn't meet my eyes at dinner, the way she'd left rooms when I entered, the way she immediately assumed the meat was bad. I pulled out a leather journal, started writing. June 15th, 2025. 2:15 a.m. Evidence wine march. Multiple bottles tampered. Medication April. Pills substituted. Dinner. June 15th. Braised beef. Suspected diazepam. Stanley hospitalized. Veronica's knowledge unknown. Suspicious behavior noted. I kept writing. Times, dates, observations. Stanley doing chores he'd never done. Always accessing my food, drinks, medications, phone calls, where he'd gone silent when I entered. Hushed arguments with Veronica. By 4:00 a.m. I had 5 pages. At 6:30 a.m., Veronica's key turned. I was making coffee like this was normal. Dad, she looked exhausted. Stanley's stable. They're running more tests. That's good, I said, pouring her a cup. She took it, wrapped both hands around it. He was asking about you. How thoughtful. Dad, I know things have been tense between you two. Have they? You know they have. Stanley feels like you don't respect him. Veronica, do you think Stanley respects me? She looked away. There it was again. He's under stress at work. Is he? The car market is tough. His commissions are down, I see. I didn't mention the gambling debts, the $60,000 in online poker, the forged mortgage application on my house. I'd gotten the bank's letter 2 weeks ago. I should sleep, Veronica said, setting down her untouched coffee. They said he can come home tomorrow. Of course, rest. She started upstairs, paused. Dad, tonight's dinner. Did it taste strange? No. I lied smoothly. Why, no reason. Stanley said something before he passed out. The doctors will sort it out. She nodded and disappeared upstairs. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by family that wanted me dead, or at least a son-in-law who wanted me dead, and a daughter who was complicit or willfully blind. For 68 years, I'd been the peacekeeper, the generous host who let them live here, rentré. But standing in the early morning light, I felt something cold settle into my chest. I'd spent 42 years learning how drugs could harm. Now it was time to remember, I'd also spent 42 years learning to document, investigate, and prove when something had gone wrong. Stanley Weber wanted to play pharmacist, mix deadly cocktails, and serve them to an old man he thought too foolish to notice. But he'd forgotten something. I wasn't just any old man. I was Francis Holmes. I'd run my own pharmacy for 20 years. I'd caught prescription fraud, identified black market pills, reported dozens of cases to the DEA. And I'd kept meticulous records of everything. I opened the journal again. Decision made. June 16th, 2025, 7:15 a.m. I will not be a victim in my own home. The game had changed. Stanley just didn't know it yet. Monday morning, June 16th. I hadn't slept, but I wasn't tired. The adrenaline of discovery had sharpened my mind better than any caffeine could. I dressed in my best slacks and sweater. The concerned father-in-law visiting his ailing son-in-law, the role I'd perfected over 6 years. The hospital parking lot was half empty at 10:00 a.m. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. Cardiac observation. Stanley had been moved there after his heart rate spiked overnight. I found his room easily. He was awake, propped against pillows, pale, but alert. When he saw me, something flickered in his expression. Guilt, fear, Francis. His voice was hoarse. You didn't have to come. Of course I did. I pulled a chair close, playing my part. You gave us quite a scare. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. He rubbed his chest. They say my heart. Something about irregular rhythms. They found something in my blood work. What did they find? His eyes narrowed slightly. They're not sure yet. Some kind of medication. They asked if I'd taken anything unusual. And had you no. The lie came smooth. That's what's so weird. I don't take any medications. I nodded sympathetically. Maybe something in the food. Sometimes meats can have additives. Yeah, maybe that's it. He relaxed a fraction. The doctors mentioned something like that. I let silence settle, watching the monitors beep. He thought he was safe. Thought I was just a foolish old man. I should let you rest, I said, standing. Is there anything you need? No, I'm good. Veronica's bringing my phone later. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, Stanley, that dinner you made the recipe. Where did you get it? His face went carefully blank. Online. Some cooking blog. I might try making it myself sometime. Sure. Yeah, sure. I left him there, walked down the corridor, and that's when I heard it. Francis Holmes. I turned. The voice belonged to a woman in scrubs, mid-50s, with kind eyes. It took me a moment to place her. Gloria Richards, I said. It's been years. Gloria had been a nurse at Providence, Portland when I had supplied medications there. We'd worked together on countless prescription verifications. I thought that was your name on the visitor log, she said, giving me a quick hug. What brings you here, my son-in-law, Stanley Weber? He had some kind of reaction last night. Her smile faltered just slightly, but I caught it. Stanley Weber, room 412. That's him, Francis. She glanced down the hallway. Can we talk? Maybe grab a coffee? The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty. We sat in a corner booth, 2 cups of terrible coffee between us. What's going on at your house? Gloria asked, her voice low. What do you mean? This is the second emergency call from your address in a month. She leaned forward. Francis? I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but we've known each other 20 years. The last call was for your daughter. The coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. Veronica. May 18th. Overdose of sedatives. Diazepam specifically. She was brought in unconscious. Had to have her stomach pumped. I set the cup down carefully. She never mentioned it. She told the ER staff it was an accident. Said she'd taken her prescription pills but forgot she'd already taken them, doubled up by mistake. Do you believe that Gloria's expression was troubled? Francis, I've been doing this for 30 years. The toxicology report showed levels consistent with more than a double dose. And now your son-in-law comes in with a medication cocktail he claims he never took. My mind raced, pieces clicking together. What exactly was in Stanley's blood? I can't give specifics without authorization, but the attending physician mentioned benzodiazepines high levels from dinner last night. Dinner he prepared himself. Yes. Gloria's eyes widened. Francis, are you safe at home? I almost laughed. The irony was too perfect. She was worried about me being poisoned, not realizing I'd already survived 2 attempts. I'm being careful, I said. Gloria, the incident with Veronica. You said May 18th. That's right. I pulled out my phone, opened my calendar. May 18th was 3 days before Stanley had asked about my will, 1 week before he'd offered to help with my medications. The pattern was clear. He'd practiced on Veronica first, maybe intentionally, maybe accidentally overdosed her while testing the dosage. Either way, he'd learned from it and then turned his attention to me. Does Veronica know you're telling me this? I asked. No one knows. And technically, I could get in trouble for discussing patient information. She paused. But if something's wrong, Francis, you need to know. I appreciate that more than you know. We talked for a few more minutes catching up, but my mind was elsewhere cataloging information, building a timeline. When I left the hospital, the morning sun felt different, harsher, more revealing. I drove home, slowly processing what I'd learned. Stanley hadn't acted on impulse. He'd experimented first on his own wife. He'd seen how the medications worked, how much was needed, how quickly they took effect. The house was empty when I arrived. Veronica had left a note, gone to pharmacy for Stanley's prescriptions. Back this afternoon. I went to my study, opened my journal, added new entries. May 18th, 2025. Veronica hospitalized for diazepam overdose. Stanley likely responsible. Testing dosage June 16th, 2025. Confirmed Stanley's poisoning was benzodiazepines, same drug used on Veronica. This was not impulse. This was practice? Question. Did Veronica know what he was doing to her? Either way, she kept it from me. That silence speaks volumes. I sat back looking at the words I'd written. This wasn't just a greedy son-in-law. This was methodical calculated. Stanley Weber had turned my daughter into a test subject. And when he'd perfected his technique, he'd aimed it at me. The question now was, what was I going to do about it? Stanley came home Wednesday afternoon, June 18th. Veronica fussed over him, setting him up on the couch with pillows and blankets. I watched from my study doorway. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "Better," Stanley said. His color had returned, though he moved carefully. Doctor said I need to take it easy, of course. And they figured out what caused the episode. Some kind of food poisoning. Bad meat or something. Veronica nodded quickly. That's what they said. "Francis, maybe we should throw out any meat in the freezer." "Good idea," I agreed. Stanley's eyes met mine just for a moment, and I saw the question. Did I suspect I gave him my best grandfatherly smile? "Actually, Stanley, while you're recovering, I've been thinking. You mentioned you're having trouble at work." His expression shuddered. Well, with you being out sick and the medical bills, I thought maybe I could help." "Help how financially, just until you're back on your feet." I sat in the armchair. "We're family after all." Veronica's face lit up. "Dad, that's so generous." "How much were you thinking?" Stanley asked carefully. "Depends on what you need. Why don't you show me your current expenses? I can look at your budget. See where we can ease the pressure." I watched Greed war with suspicion. Greed won. "Yeah. Okay, that would be helpful." "Wonderful. I'll need to see your bank statements bills just to get a clear picture." "Sure, I can pull those up." It was almost too easy. By Thursday morning, Stanley had given me access to his financial records. He thought he was getting free money. What he'd actually done was hand me evidence. The forged mortgage application on my house appeared in his email history dated May 25th. He'd applied for a $200,000 loan, using my property as collateral complete with what appeared to be my signature. The application had been denied, flagged for suspicious activity. The bank had sent me a warning letter 2 weeks ago, which I dismissed as a scam. Now I understood it was real. Stanley had tried to steal equity from my house. I documented everything, screenshots, printed emails. The paper trail was growing. But Friday afternoon, I found the real smoking gun. The house had a shared computer in the den. I'd noticed Stanley frantically closing windows when I'd walked in yesterday. Standard guilty behavior. Friday, with both of them allowed, I sat down at the desktop. The browser history had been cleared, but people forget about autosave passwords and cache data. It took me 15 minutes to find the email thread from Stanley Weber to Veronica Holmes. Weber, date June 2nd, 2025. Subject timeline. "Baby, we need to move faster." I talked to that buyer again, the developer. He's still interested in the property at $820K, but won't wait past August. "We need to close this soon." Veronica's response. "How Dad's not going anywhere anytime soon. He's healthy. Stanley. Not if he keeps having accidents." Remember what I said about the pills? Veronica? Stanley. "I don't know if I can do this." Stanley. "You want to stay in this house forever, waiting for him to die naturally while we drown in debt? Or do you want the life we planned, the condo downtown, the freedom, the money to finally live?" Veronica. I wish there was another way." Stanley. "There isn't. Just keep quiet and let me handle it. By the end of summer, this will all be over." I read it 3 times, photographed the screen, sent the images to my email, saved them to a USB drive. They'd already found a buyer. They'd agreed on a price. They were just waiting for me to die. The phrase "keep having accidents" echoed in my mind, plural. How many times had Stanley tried? I checked more emails going back months. Found another thread from April. Stanley to Veronica. The old man mentioned changing his will. We need to make sure we're still the primary beneficiaries. Can you bring it up casually, Veronica, to Stanley? He won't tell me. Says it's all handled, but I think everything comes to me anyway. He doesn't have anyone else. Stanley, make sure we can't risk him leaving it to some charity. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from anger. They'd been planning this for months. Every kind word, every concerned question, every helpful gesture had been calculated, designed to keep me compliant while they plotted my death. I closed the browser, cleared my tracks, went back to my study. The journal entry was clinical precise. June 20th, 2025. Email evidence confirms premeditation. Stanley and Veronica planning to kill me for months. Buyer lined up for house at $820,000. Timeline completion by end of August 2025. Stanley referred to multiple accidents. Veronica is complicit, reluctant, but ultimately agrees. Financial motive. Stanley's gambling debts. Veronica wants freedom in downtown condo. They see me as an obstacle to be liquidated. I sat back looking at the evidence I'd compiled. The journal, the screenshots, the photos of tampered wine and fake medications, the forged mortgage documents, the emails planning my murder. It was enough to go to the police, probably enough for an arrest. But something held me back. Stanley and Veronica had spent months plotting against me. They'd practiced on Veronica herself. They'd poisoned my food, wine, medications. They'd forged my signature, tried to steal my home, and waited impatiently for my death. All while living under my roof, eating my food, accepting my generosity, and they thought I was too old, too foolish, too trusting to notice. I looked at my chess set at the game Victor and I had left mid-play. In chess, you don't just react. You anticipate, you set traps. You sacrifice pieces to gain position. And when the moment is right, you strike. Stanley and Veronica had made their moves. They'd shown their strategy. Now it was my turn. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to a number I hadn't called in years. Henry Foster, tax attorney. We'd worked together when I'd sold my pharmacy. Henry, it's Francis Holmes. I need your help with something. How soon can we meet? The game was no longer about survival. It was about justice. And I was done playing defense. The week after finding those emails was the longest of my life. June 21st through 27th. 7 days of pretending everything was normal while living with people who wanted me dead. Stanley recovered quickly, too quickly. By Monday, he was back to his usual self, lounging on my couch, eating my food, plotting my demise. I played my role perfectly. The concerned father-in-law, the generous host, the foolish old man who suspected nothing. But I was watching, always watching. Tuesday morning, my tea tasted wrong, not poisoned wrong, just different. I poured it down the sink when no one was looking. Wednesday, my daily vitamins looked slightly off. Different size, different coating, I didn't take them. Instead, I packaged them in an evidence bag, labeled and dated. Thursday, the hand soap in my bathroom gave me a rash. Not the usual brand, though the bottle looked identical. I checked the ingredients. 3 chemicals had been swapped, all skin irritants. They were getting creative, or desperate. By Friday, June 27th, I documented 7 different attempts. Small things, subtle things, the kind that would wear down an ordinary 68-year-old until his body gave up. But I wasn't ordinary, and I wasn't giving up. That evening, Stanley emerged from the kitchen with that familiar smile. "Francis," he called out, "I've been feeling terrible about how things have been between us, so I made dinner a peace offering." Veronica appeared behind him, her expression carefully neutral. "That's nice of you, Stanley." "It's that same recipe," he continued. "The braised beef. I know I messed it up last time, but I practiced. Got it right this time." I walked into the dining room, took my seat. The plate looked perfect. The aroma was rich, savory, and underneath that familiar bitter almond scent. But this time, There was something else, something sharper, more chemical. Dioxin, a cardiac medication. In the right dose, it regulated heart rhythm. In the wrong dose, it stopped hearts completely. Combined with benzodiazepines, it was a lethal cocktail designed to look like natural cardiac arrest in an elderly man. Stanley had learned from his mistakes. This wasn't just sedation. This was murder. "Smells delicious," I said, picking up my fork. "I really put my heart into this one," Stanley said. The emphasis on heart wasn't accidental. Veronica sat down with her own plate, but I noticed she wasn't eating, just pushing food around. "Aren't you hungry, dear?" I asked. "I ate earlier," she said quickly. "Lunch ran late." Of course, she knew what was in the food. Stanley was already eating, shoveling forkfuls into his mouth, but his plate was clean. I could tell from the smell. He'd served himself from a different pan. "Stanley, could you grab the wine?" I asked the Pinot from the cellar bottom shelf, third bottle from the left. "Sure thing." He stood headed for the basement door. The moment he disappeared down the stairs, I moved. 3 seconds. My plate slid left. His poison plate slid right. My clean utensils swapped for his used ones. When Stanley returned with the wine, I was cutting into what had been his portion. "This really is better than last time," I said. His smile widened. "Thanks, Francis. I'm glad you like it." We ate in relative silence. Veronica barely touched her food. Stanley finished quickly, then excused himself to watch television. I stayed at the table watching the clock. 30 minutes. That's how long it had taken last time. At minute 28, I heard Stanley's voice from the living room. "Veronica? I feel weird." Her chair scraped back. "What's wrong?" "My chest. It's tight. And my head." I stood slowly, walked to the doorway. Stanley was pale, one hand pressed against his chest. "Should I call 911? Veronica asked, her voice rising. "Maybe just wait a minute." Stanley's words were slurred, his eyes unfocused. I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling them." "No, I don't." Stanley tried to stand, fell back onto the couch. His breathing was shallow, rapid. Veronica was crying. "What's happening?" "Stanley ambulance is on the way," I said calmly. "They'll be here in 10 minutes. Stanley's eyes found mine, and in that moment I saw it. The realization, the understanding. He knew. He knew what I'd done. His mouth opened, tried to form words, but nothing came out except a strangled gasp. The paramedics arrived in 8 minutes. They rushed in with equipment. Questions practiced efficiency. "What did he eat?" one asked. "Dinner," I said. "Braised beef." He prepared it himself. They loaded Stanley onto a stretcher, started an IV, hooked up monitors. His vital signs were all wrong. "Sir, did you take any medications today?" the paramedic asked Stanley. Stanley's eyes rolled toward me. He couldn't speak, but his expression said everything. "He doesn't take medications," Veronica said. "He's healthy. I don't understand." The paramedics exchanged glances. "We're seeing signs consistent with drug toxicity. We need to transport him now." They wheeled him out. Veronica followed, climbing into the ambulance. I stood in my doorway watching the red lights disappear. Then I went back inside, cleaned up the dishes, and made a phone call. "Victor, it's Francis. Remember that chess game we have scheduled for tomorrow? I think we might need to move it up. Something's come up that I think you'll find interesting." The call came at 2:17 a.m. Veronica, her voice shaking. "Dad, it's bad. Stanley's in cardiac intensive care. They found drugs in his system." "What kind of drugs?" "Benzodiazepines and some heart medication." "Dad, they're talking to the police." "The police?" "They said when someone comes in twice in 2 weeks with drug poisoning, they investigate. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Providence Portland's ICU was quiet at 2:45 a.m. I found Veronica in the waiting room, Mascara Street. "Where is he?" "Room 6. They won't let me in yet." Dad, what's happening? Before I could answer, a familiar voice called my name. Francis Holmes. Victor James, my chess partner and neighbor, walked toward me in plain clothes, a detective's badge clipped to his belt. Victor, you're on duty. Got called in special. His expression was serious. This is the second poisoning from your address in 2 weeks. We need to talk. Veronica's eyes widened. Dad didn't. Ma'am, wait here. Victor gestured to me. Francis, let's find somewhere private. We walked to a consultation room. Victor closed the door. Talk to me. What's going on? I pulled out my phone, opened the documentation. 3 weeks ago, I started noticing irregularities. My wine tasted wrong. My medications were tampered with. I documented everything. I showed him photos, dates, notes, the tampered wine, the fake pills, the emails between Stanley and Veronica. Victor's expression grew darker with each image. Stanley Weber tried to poison me, I said quietly. Twice. June 15th. I switched our plates. He ended up in the hospital. Tonight he tried again. Same result. You switched the plates both times. Both times. Francis, you understand what you're telling me. My son-in-law attempted to murder me twice. I used my knowledge as a pharmacist to protect myself by letting him poison himself by not eating poisoned food. What he chose to eat was his decision. Victor leaned back. This is complicated. It gets more complicated. I showed him the forged mortgage documents, the emails planning my death. They were waiting for me to die so they could sell my house. They found a buyer, agreed on a price. Stanley was speeding up the timeline. Victor read everything, jaw tightening. I need to see your house. The evidence in person? Of course, I have security footage too. You have what I installed cameras 3 weeks ago. I have video of Stanley tampering with my food, my medications, everything. Victor stood. Francis, you're not under arrest, but you're now a witness in a possible attempted murder investigation. Maybe two. I understand. And if the evidence backs it up, Stanley Weber is going to jail for a very long time. That's what I'm hoping for. We walked back to the waiting room. Veronica stood immediately. What's going on, Dad? What did you tell him? The truth, I said simply. What truth? Victor stepped forward. Ma'am, I need to ask you some questions about your relationship with your father and your husband. Her face went white. I want a lawyer. That's your right. But we'll be executing a search warrant on the residence at 2847 Laurelhurst Drive within the hour. Veronica looked at me pleading. Dad, please just tell them it was an accident. Didn't mean to poison me twice. I kept my voice level. Didn't mean to forge documents. Didn't mean to plan my death in those emails. She stepped back. You know about the emails, I know about everything, Veronica. The fake medications, the tampered wine, the deal with the buyer for $820,000. I know you knew what Stanley was doing, and you let it happen. Tears streamed down her face. I didn't. I never thought he'd actually. You chose your side when you stayed silent. I said when you watched him prepare that first dinner, and said nothing. Victor was taking notes. Mrs. Weber, anything you're saying can be used in court. I strongly suggest you speak with a lawyer. A doctor emerged from the ICU. Family of Stanley Weber. That's us, Veronica said, wiping her eyes. Mr. Weber is stable but critical. We've identified the substances diazepam and dioxin, both in potentially lethal doses. We need to know how he ingested these. He made dinner, I said, braised beef. He prepared it himself. The doctor looked confused. He poisoned himself. Apparently, Victor said, though, that's what we're determining. My phone buzzed. Henry Foster, my attorney. I need to make a call, I said to Victor. Make it quick. I stepped into the hallway, dialed Henry. Francis, I got your message. Tell me you didn't do what I think you did. I defended myself twice and now I need legal representation. You need a criminal defense attorney. No, I need you to file paperwork. I want Stanley Weber charged with attempted murder. I want the fraudulent mortgage investigated, and I want a restraining order against both Stanley and Veronica effective immediately. Long pause. You have evidence volumes including video. Then we're not playing defense. We're going on offense. Exactly. When I returned, Victor was on his phone. Veronica sat alone, staring at nothing. Francis, Victor said, ending his call. I need you to come to the station. Give a formal statement, bring all your evidence, of course. And Francis. He lowered his voice. Chest, tomorrow night. I almost smiled. I'd like that. As I walked toward the exit, Veronica called after me. Dad, wait. Please, I'm sorry. I stopped, turned to face her. I'm sorry too, Veronica. Sorry that you became someone I don't recognize. Sorry that your fear of loneliness mattered more than your father's life. It wasn't like that. Yes, it was. And now you'll have plenty of time to think about it. I left her there crying while her husband fought for his life from his own poison. Justice wasn't always sweet, but it was necessary. Monday morning, June 30th. Henry Foster's office occupied the top floor of a building downtown. I'd known Henry for 10 years since he'd handled the tax implications of selling my pharmacy. Francis, he said, reviewing the evidence. This is comprehensive. 42 years as a pharmacist taught me to document everything. You understand what we're doing? This isn't just pressing charges, this is total war. Good. That's exactly what I want. Henry pulled out a legal pad. We'll file 3 separate actions. First, criminal charges for attempted murder. Second, a civil suit to void the fraudulent mortgage application. Third, a restraining order. How long restraining order? Within 48 hours. Criminal case will take months. Civil suit, maybe 6 weeks. Stanley's still in the hospital. Under police observation, Victor put a guard on his door. What about Veronica? Henry's expression softened. She's your daughter, Francis? Are you sure you want to include her in the restraining order? She knew. She helped plan it. She chose Stanley. Then yes, we include her. He made another note. You mentioned a second property, a commercial building on Division Street. I rent it to a pharmacy chain. Brings in $4,500 a month. Stanley and Veronica don't know about it. I never mentioned it. Henry smiled grimly. Good. That gives us leverage. We spent 3 hours going through every detail. The emails, the forged documents, the security footage. One question, Henry said. You switched the plates both times. A prosecutor might argue you could have just not eaten the food. I could have, but then I wouldn't have proof he'd have disposed of the evidence. So you let him poison himself. I let him eat what he prepared twice. Henry leaned back. It's brilliant. You didn't poison anyone. You simply refused to be poisoned. What happened to Stanley was his own doing. Exactly. But Francis Stanley's going to fight back. He's looking at serious prison time. People get desperate. Let him fight. I have evidence. Evidence can be challenged. And Veronica will likely testify against you. That hit harder than I expected. She already has. Hasn't she? Victor mentioned she tried to blame you at the hospital. I stood, walked to the window. The city stretched out below. File everything I said. All 3 actions today. I'll have the paperwork ready by end of business. My phone rang. Victor, Francis, you at Henry's office? Yes. What's wrong? Stanley's awake and talking. He's asking for a lawyer. Marcus Webb. Henry's expression changed. Marcus Webb. You know him, I asked. Criminal defense attorney? Expensive aggressive? Henry frowned. How is Stanley paying for him? After the call ended, Henry discussed strategy. If Stanley had hired Marcus Webb, this was going to be ugly. There's something else, Henry said. The commercial property. We should transfer it to a trust today. Before Stanley's lawyer can file claims, can we do that? If we move fast, I'll call Sarah Bennett. Sarah Bennett, the notary I'd worked with years ago, met us at her office. She was efficient, asked no unnecessary questions. By 4 p.m., my commercial property was in an irrevocable trust protected from claims. That evening, I returned home to an empty house. Police had removed Stanley and Veronica's belongings as evidence. I sat in my study looking at the chessboard. My phone buzzed. A text from Veronica. "Dad, please, we can talk about this. Please don't do this to us." No punctuation. Desperation. I deleted it without responding. Another text. "I'm your daughter." Doesn't that mean anything I blocked her number? Tuesday morning, July 1st. Henry called. Restraining order approved. Effective immediately. Stanley and Veronica cannot come within 500 FT of you or your property. Criminal charges filed, civil suit filed. Civil. How did Stanley react? According to Victor, he threw a water pitcher at the wall. I smiled. Good. Francis, there's one more thing. Marcus Webb filed a motion. He's claiming Stanley is the victim of elder abuse. Says you've been mentally manipulating both him and Veronica. That you orchestrated the poisoning incidents to frame Stanley. The audacity was impressive. On what evidence? None. But he's requesting a psychiatric evaluation for you. Let him. I'll pass any evaluation they want. I figured you'd say that. I've already agreed to it. Contingent on Stanley also submitting to evaluation when next week. Independent psychiatrist court appointed. That night, Victor came by for our delayed chess game. He moved his rook. "You know what you're doing, right?" he asked. "Playing chess." "I mean, with Stanley, with all of this. I moved my queen, putting his king in check. I'm protecting myself. Same as I've been doing since June 15th. Victor studied the board. "You're playing a dangerous game. Stanley's lawyer is vicious. Let her. The evidence speaks for itself. Evidence can be twisted." I met his eyes. "Victor, I spent 42 years making sure people got the right medications. I never made a mistake, not once. I'm not starting now." He moved his king. "Just be careful." "Checkmate in 3 moves," I said. He looked at the board, saw it resigned. "You're a cold player, Francis. Only when necessary." Marcus Webb's counteroffensive came fast and brutal. July 3rd, Stanley was released from the hospital and immediately held a press conference on the courthouse steps. "I watched it on the local news standing in my kitchen. I am the victim of a calculated attack by my father-in-law." Stanley said, looking pale but determined. "Francis Holmes has engaged in a pattern of psychological abuse against my wife and me for years." The reporter asked about the poisoning incidents. "I prepared dinner for my family. Somehow Francis contaminated the food. I believe he did it to frame me, to make me look dangerous, so he could have us removed from the house." Complete inversion of reality, and the reporters were eating it up. Marcus Webb stepped forward. "We have evidence that Mr. Holmes has been suffering from paranoid delusions. We're requesting a full psychiatric evaluation and asking the court to consider whether he should be declared incompetent." I turned off the TV. Henry called moments later. "You saw it, I saw it. Standard defense strategy. Attack the accuser's credibility. Make you look unstable." "I'm not unstable, I know. But now we prove it. The psychiatric evaluation is scheduled for July 8th. Dr. Patricia Morgan, highly respected, completely independent." "What about Stanley? He'll be evaluated the same day, different time." The next few days were tense. Veronica went on local TV crying, talking about her troubled father, who lived in fantasies and couldn't accept that she'd grown up. Each interview was carefully orchestrated by Marcus Webb. Each one painted me as the villain. But I had something they didn't. Patience. July 8th arrived. Doctor from Morgan's office was in a medical building near the hospital. She was in her early 60s, with kind eyes and a non-nonsense demeanor. "Mr. Holmes, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Answer honestly." We talked for 3 hours about my career, my wife's death. 5 years ago, my relationship with Veronica, the timeline of events with Stanley. I showed her everything: the journal, the photos, the emails, the security footage. "Why did you install cameras?" she asked. "Because I suspected I was being poisoned and I needed proof." "Why not go to the police immediately?" "I needed evidence. Without it, it would be my word against theirs." "So you let Stanley poison himself. Twice. I protected myself. Twice." "What Stanley ate was his own choice." She made notes. Finally, she closed her notebook. "Mr. Holmes, I've conducted thousands of evaluations. You show no signs of paranoia, delusion, or cognitive impairment. Your actions, while unconventional, show clear, rational thinking and planning." July 10th. Marcus Webb filed another motion demanding the security footage be suppressed, claiming it was obtained illegally since Stanley and Veronica hadn't consented to being recorded. Henry countered, it was Francis's home, and Oregon law allowed homeowners to record activities in their own residences. July 12th, the DA's office announced they were moving forward with charges against Stanley: 2 counts of attempted murder, 1 count of fraud for the forged mortgage documents. Stanley's response a press conference where he broke down crying, claiming he was innocent. Veronica stood beside him holding his hand. That image bothered me more than the accusations. My daughter standing by the man who tried to kill me. July 15th. Victor came by with news. We found out how Stanley's paying for Marcus Webb, how he took out a loan, used your house as collateral. The forged documents, no different ones. He forged them after being released from the hospital. We're adding it to the charges. Even facing prison, he was still trying to steal my home. July 18th, preliminary hearing. I sat in the courtroom watching Stanley and Marcus Webb present their case. Marcus was good. He made Stanley look sympathetic. The desperate son-in-law trying to care for an elderly, unstable man. Veronica testified, "My father has always been controlling. When I married Stanley, Dad couldn't handle it. He's been trying to drive us apart ever since." Lies, all lies, but delivered with tears and conviction. Then it was my turn. Henry walked me through the evidence: the timeline, the emails, the forged documents, and finally the security footage. The courtroom went silent as they watched Stanley carefully opening pill bottles, crushing tablets, mixing them into a sauce. The timestamp was clear: June 27th, 5:47 p.m. Marcus Webb objected, argued, tried to have it suppressed. The judge overruled him. The footage is admissible. Continue. More footage. Stanley, tampering with wine bottles, replacing medications, adding something to a bar of soap. When it ended, I looked at Stanley. His face was red, his jaw clenched. The judge spoke. "Based on the evidence presented, I'm ruling there is probable cause to proceed to trial. Mr. Weber, you will remain free on bail, but with electronic monitoring. Trial date is set for August 15th. As we left the courthouse, Marcus Webb intercepted us. "Mr. Holmes, my client is willing to discuss a settlement." "No settlement," I said. "You haven't heard the terms." "Don't need to." "Stanley tried to kill me twice. There's no settlement for that." Marcus's smile was cold. "We'll see you in court then." "And Mr. Holmes, I hope you're ready because I'm going to tear apart every piece of evidence you have. By the time I'm done, the jury will think you're the criminal." Henry stepped between us. "We're done here, Marcus." As we walked away, I felt something shift. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about winning completely. Totally. And I was ready. August 15th, 2025. The courtroom was packed. Marcus Webb had turned this into a media circus painting Stanley as a victim of a paranoid old man. But I was about to change the narrative. Henry Foster sat beside me. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready since June 15th. The judge entered. Judge Catherine Morrison, 62, stern but fair. Stanley sat at the defense table with Marcus Webb looking thinner, paler. The electronic monitor on his ankle was visible. Veronica sat in the gallery behind him, hands clutched in her lap. The prosecutor, Daniel Chen, presented the evidence methodically: the security footage, the forged documents, the emails, the toxicology reports from both hospitalizations. Marcus Webb objected constantly, but Judge Morrison overruled him repeatedly. Then it was time for witnesses. Henry stood. Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence regarding Mr. Holmes's character and financial situation. Proceed. The courtroom doors opened. Robert Chen, president of Pacific Northwesties, walked in. 70 years old, silver hair, perfectly tailored suit. Stanley's head snapped up. He whispered something to Marcus Webb. Mr. Chen, Henry said, can you explain your relationship with Francis Holmes? Francis and I have been business partners for 10 years. When he sold his pharmacy in 2015, I offered him 15% equity in Pacific Northwest Pharmacies. We now operate 43 locations across Oregon and Washington, and the current value of Mr. Holmes's stake, approximately $1.2 million. The courtroom erupted. I watched Stanley's face drain of color. Veronica's mouth fell open. Marcus Webb stood. Objection. This is irrelevant. Your Honor, Henry countered. The defense argued Mr. Holmes's mental state deteriorated due to financial stress. This demonstrates he had no such stress. Overruled. Continue. I saw it then, the moment Stanley understood. He'd been chasing $850,000, plotting murder, risking everything while I'd been sitting on over $1 million he never knew existed. The irony was beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Chen. But we weren't done, Your Honor. We have one more witness, someone the defense hired. Marcus Webb's head jerked up. What? The doors opened. A man in his 40s, nervous, sweating. Thomas Garrett, private investigator. Mr. Garrett, did Stanley Weber hire you in March? Yes. For what purpose? He wanted me to dig up dirt on Francis Holmes. Find anything that could be used against him. Gambling, debts, affairs, financial problems, and did you find anything? No, Mr. Holmes is clean. What happened next? Thomas pulled out a folder. In April, Mr. Weber called again, asked if I knew anyone who could forge documents. I said no. Then he started talking about speeding things up, that waiting for natural causes was taking too long. The courtroom went silent. Did he elaborate? He said, and I quote, "The old man is tougher than I thought. I might need to give nature a push." When I asked what he meant, he said he'd figured out a way using medication. That's when I knew I needed to get out. What did you do? I recorded our conversations, all of them. Then I contacted Mr. Holmes and turned over everything. I didn't want to be an accessory to murder. Henry entered the recordings into evidence. The bailiff played them. Stanley's voice filled the room. I need this done by August. We've got a buyer lined up. $20,000, but I can't wait for the old fool to die naturally. I've been working on a pharmaceutical solution. Veronica gasped. Marcus Webb was on his feet. Your Honor, these recordings were obtained by the man your client hired. Judge Morrison said coldly. Overruled. Stanley was shaking, face red, hands clenched. He leaned over to Marcus, whispering urgently. Marcus stood. Your Honor, my client would like to discuss a plea agreement. I'm sure he would, Judge Morrison said. But let's hear the rest first. The prosecutor presented everything: the forged mortgage applications, the email chains with the property buyer, the timeline showing Stanley's mounting gambling debts. Then I took the stand. The prosecutor walked me through it, my career, my knowledge of medications, how I'd recognized the benzodiazepines, the decision to switch the plates. Why didn't you just refuse to eat? Because I needed proof. If I had refused, Stanley would have disposed of the evidence and tried again. By switching the plates, I protected myself and documented his intent. Marcus cross-examined me aggressively, tried to paint me as a manipulative mastermind. Isn't it true you could have simply called the police and told them What, that my son-in-law might be planning to poison me? Without evidence, they'd have done nothing. So you let him poison himself twice. I let him eat what he prepared twice. The poison was his choice, not mine. Marcus tried for another hour but couldn't shake my testimony. The evidence was too solid. Judge Morrison didn't need long to deliberate. Stanley Weber, please stand. Stanley stood on shaking legs. Based on the evidence presented, I find probable cause for all charges, 2 counts of attempted murder, multiple counts of fraud and forgery. Bail is revoked. You will be remanded to custody immediately. 2 officers moved toward Stanley. He looked at Veronica, desperate. She looked away. As they handcuffed him, Stanley's control broke. This is insane. That old man played us all. Mr. Weber? Judge Morrison said sharply, I suggest you save your energy for trial, where you'll likely be found guilty and sentenced to significant prison time. They led him away, still protesting. I watched him go and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. October 12, 2025. 2 months after the hearing, Stanley Weber had been sentenced to 12 years in prison. The trial lasted 3 days. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes. Veronica received 3 years probation and a restraining order. She was forbidden from contacting me or coming within 500 FT of my property. My house was now in an irrevocable trust protected from any future claims. The fraudulent mortgage had been voided. The would-be buyer had backed out when the story hit the news. I was sitting in my study when the doorbell rang. I checked the security camera I'd kept installed. Veronica stood on my porch holding a cardboard box. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. I opened the door, didn't invite her in. Dad, she said. Her eyes were red, face thinner. I came to get my last things from the storage room. Fine, 10 minutes. She nodded, set down the box, walked past me. I stayed in the hallway watching her gather childhood photos, some books, a few pieces of jewelry from her mother. When she came back down, box in her arms, she stopped. Dad, I need to say this. I was wrong. I was scared and stupid, and I let Stanley manipulate me. I should have protected you. You should have been my daughter. Instead, you were his accomplice. The words hit her like a physical blow. I know I can never make this right, but I need you to know that I didn't understand what he was really doing. I thought it was just talk, just fantasies about the money. I never thought he'd actually, you knew enough. You knew about the first time I ended up in the hospital. You knew about the forged documents. You knew about the plans to sell my house. And you said nothing. Tears streamed down her face. I'm so sorry. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of tea. My hands were steady, my conscience clear. When I returned, Veronica was still standing there. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. What did you know? When you switched those plates, did you know what would happen to Stanley? I looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman I'd raised who'd become a stranger. I knew exactly what would happen. He'd prepared a poison intended to kill me. When he ate it instead, he suffered the consequences of his own actions. That's not murder, Veronica. That's justice. But you let him. I protected myself, that's all. Everything that happened to Stanley, he did to himself. She wiped her eyes. I visited him yesterday in prison. He's not doing well. I don't care. He wants to apologize. He asked me to ask you if you'd consider visiting him if I set down my teacup. The china clinked softly against the saucer. I'd purchased this set with Martha 40 years ago. We'd used it every Sunday morning. Veronica, look at me. She did. Your husband tried to kill me twice. He experimented on you first, whether you realize it or not. That hospital visit you had in May, that wasn't an accident. He was testing dosages. Her face went white. The nurse told me you were brought in with a massive overdose of benzodiazepines Stanley was practicing seeing how much was too much. And when he figured it out, he used that knowledge on me. She staggered, caught herself on the doorframe. No, he said. He said I must have taken my pills twice by accident. And you believed him because that was easier than seeing the truth. The realization broke something in her. She sank down onto the stairs, head in her hands. I felt no sympathy, only a distant sadness for the daughter I'd lost long before all this started. I think you should go now, I said. She looked up at me, mascara, running face destroyed, searching for some crack in my armor, some sign of the father who used to comfort her. She wouldn't find it. I picked up my teacup, held it steady, met her eyes with cold finality. You forgot a simple truth, I said quietly. I know more about poisons than both of you combined. The words landed like a sentence. She flinched, stood, grabbed her box. At the door, she turned back one last time. I love you, Dad. No, you don't. If you loved me, you would have warned me. You would have protected me. You would have been my daughter instead of his accomplice. What you love is the idea of me forgiving you, and I won't. She left. I watched through the window as she loaded the box into her car and drove away. I never saw her again. 3 weeks later, I enrolled in a veterans chess tournament. Took second place, lost to a 74-year-old retired teacher named Margaret who played a vicious Sicilian defense. In November, I flew to Paris, spent 2 weeks visiting museums, drinking wine that tasted exactly as it should, eating meals I'd prepared myself in my rented apartment. I used the dividend from my pharmacy shares, $54,000 that year. Money Stanley and Veronica never knew existed. When I returned home, I framed a photo and set it on my desk. Martha and me 30 years ago, standing in front of the pharmacy we'd built together. Martha, I said to her image, I did it. Our home is safe. Our legacy protected. I'd learned something important through all of this. Something I wished I'd understood earlier. Kindness without boundaries isn't virtue. It's weakness. And predators like Stanley and Veronica are drawn to weakness like sharks to blood. I'd been kind for too long, patient for too long, understanding for too long. But when they pushed me far enough, when they threatened everything Martha and I had built, I'd shown them what a pharmacist knows that most people don't. The difference between medicine and poison is just a matter of dose. And sometimes justice requires letting people taste their own concoctions. I sipped my tea, perfectly brewed, perfectly safe, and smiled. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.